Hi everyone. I'm outside at the church today because today I wanted to measure something really big. So I brought with me some of my measuring tools. Okay, so here we go. So I have a ruler and I have a measuring tape. So the measuring tape see, it just kind of pulls out and it gets longer and longer, and I can measure things that I want to know how big they are. You see, I've been measuring lots of things, doors and windows, and I've been measuring things that I'm just interested in knowing how big they are. Well, one of the things I wondered how big they were was, how big is God? Now, I know that I am 5 feet and 2 inches tall. And I think God's a little bit bigger than that, but I'm not sure how big. But you know, I was reading in my Bible that we can learn a lot about God by looking at the sky. So I thought I would start by measuring with my handy dandy measuring tape the sky. Do you think I'm going to be able to do that? Let me turn my camera around so that you can see the sky. Well, there it is. There's the sky. It's kind of big, huh? Do you think that I'm going to be able to measure the sky? I don't think I'm going to be able to measure it. And I think that that's why God in the Bible refers to the sky, refers to everything that He has created. Because it's important for us to remember that we cannot measure God. Let me read to you something out of the Bible. Okay, here we go. I'm going to read it off my paper. Psalm 119 says this: "The heavens are telling the glory of God, and the firmament," so that's everything that's up there, "declares His handiwork. Day to day pours forth speech, and night to night declares knowledge. There is no speech, there are no words, their voice is not heard, yet their voice goes through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world." Now, I think that's pretty amazing, that what we see up there, what we see in the sky, actually tell us a lot about God. So I have a project for you this week. I want you to try to figure out just how big God is. I want you to go outside, maybe even lay down in the snow in your warm winter clothes, and look up. Look up to the sky and try to understand just how big God is, and then tell me all about it. All right? See you next week.
The glory of the risen Lord. Who can compare with the beauty of the Lord? Forever He will be the Lamb upon the throne. I gladly bow the knee and worship Him, my Lord. I will proclaim the glory of the risen Lord, who once was slain to reconcile man to God. Forever You will be the Lamb upon the throne. I gladly bow the knee and worship You,
to the Lord, O mighty ones. Ascribe to the Lord glory and strength. Ascribe to the Lord the glory due his name. Worship the Lord in the splendor of his holiness. The voice of the Lord is over the waters, the glory of God, the voice of the Lord is over the waters, the God of glory thunders, the Lord thunders over the mighty waters. The voice of the Lord is powerful, the voice of the Lord is majestic, the voice of the Lord breaks the cedars, the Lord breaks in pieces the cedars of Lebanon. He makes Lebanon skip like a calf, Sirion like a young wild ox. The voice of the Lord strikes with flashes of lightning. The voice of the Lord shakes the desert. The Lord shakes the desert of Kadesh. The voice of the Lord twists the oaks and strips the forest bare. And in his temple all cry glory. The Lord sits enthroned over the flood. The Lord is enthroned as king forever. The Lord gives strength to his people. The Lord blesses his people with peace. If there is one thing that I cannot get into, it's pop culture. And even worse than that, in my opinion, is when it's Christian pop culture, when everybody goes on a craze about the very same thing. The latest Christian movie or a new worship song that has taken the world by storm. When those things come to surface, I go out of my way to avoid them. It's not necessarily that it's a bad thing. I just don't like being part of the crowd that follows. In recent events, though, in the United States of America, those things have had my ear. This is not pulp culture. This is not some passing phase, but the real life experience of our American neighbors. Like many of you, I'm still trying to put together in my head the events that have transpired and wondering about the future. I am sure that if my mother could come back and speak to me today, she would say, "This is it, Charlotte. This is what I've been telling you about, the trouble that you would experience in your time. You didn't get to see a bunch of war or the plagues of earlier generations, but now you are seeing things I have cautioned you about your whole life. No one person or society can avoid it forever. It's part of living in a fallen world." Suddenly, the chaos of the last number of months and years is becoming real, and we really can't get away from it. This is not pop culture. This is not a phase that one can shut their eyes to and hope it will go away. What is here and what is happening in real time for us to experience and eventually tell our future generations about. Throughout the events which transpired on Capitol Hill this week were a multitude of voices. I certainly did not hear them all, but one in particular resonated with me. It was the voice of the person announcing to those who were in the building at the time of the invasion to shelter in place and to stay safe. Now, I've tried to find the actual recording of that moment, but in all of the news that's going on, I haven't been able to find it again because I wanted to get exactly what was said. But the part that struck me was not as much what was said as how it was said. The people who were in the room gathered for what should have been an everyday kind of thing, a normal congressional activity, were being instructed to hide, to shelter in place, to get down on the floor, to do whatever they had to do to stay safe. And it was clear that the voice that was speaking to them, and I don't know whose voice it was, but it was clear that the voice who was speaking to them was very shaken. Now, that struck a chord in me because you could hear the fear and that you knew that it was a very unknown future. We don't know yet what is likely to happen in coming days, but we can hope and pray, but we never really know the future for sure. We only know that with God all things are possible and that his voice is the one that we can rest in to assure our hearts. At that moment, I had a deep appreciation for that voice because they tried to lead in spite of their own weakness. They did what was the right thing to do in that moment, in spite of having very little ability to control the outcome. Now, as a leader, I have a deep respect for that kind of authority, leading out of weakness, knowing that there is one greater than I who can bring about what we cannot imagine. The voice of that leader, the one who is greater than you or I, is the one I want to point you to today. In the psalm that was just read, or the verses of the psalm that was just read, Psalm 29, we are repeatedly pointed back to the voice of God, the resounding presence of his power throughout the earth. The image that it presents is of a wild storm, one that rises up in the waters of the Mediterranean Sea and is so powerful in the noise of the thunder and in the effects that happen, it's splitting powerful trees in half, that there is no question about the God who ordained the storm is the mighty and sovereign one. This storm responds to the plea that happened in Psalm 28. In Psalm 28, if you were to look at the beginning, the psalmist says, "To you I call, O Lord my rock, do not turn a deaf ear to me. For if you remain silent, I will be like those who have gone down to the pit. Hear my cry for mercy as I call to you for help, as I lift my hands toward your most holy place." This is the plea of the psalmist, just one chapter before. The psalmist wants the one true God to intervene against that which is wicked, and he does. The only response can be glory, to give God glory. Literally, a falling on one's face of recognizing that our humanity is absolutely nothing in the face of the one who created the universe and all that is in it. When we are in a time of crisis, we need a strong voice. I think back to the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic and how we needed to hear the voices of our leaders in the medical industry, leaders politically, spiritual leaders. We needed to hear that reassurance, that strength, that this too shall pass, that there is some light at the end of the tunnel. Well, now we are starting to see that light, that hope that this too will end. Just as the psalmist hears God's voice in the midst of a storm, which reaffirms God's strength, so too can we find reassurance from God in the midst of our storms. Reassurance that God is bigger, stronger, and more relevant today than we can fully comprehend. He is bigger than the other powers that surround us. He is bigger than the fear that would threaten to consume us. He is bigger than anything we can or cannot see. This was the message of the psalmist when he says at the beginning, "Ascribe to the Lord, O mighty ones." If you do not have your Bible out, I would encourage you to look this up after, or even hit pause right now and check it out. Do you see the number of times that the word Lord is done in all capital letters? It is reference to the dominance, the greatness, the majesty of the one true God, which diminishes all the other so-called powers of the false gods of the nations around them. Israel was in the midst of a very long and slow transition from understanding Yahweh to be the only God, as many of their neighbors had other deities. Now maybe you think it's crazy to think that golden calves or some kind of planetary thing is a deity and has some kind of power. But if we think of it in light of our ideas now, maybe we are not so far off from that. Have you ever thought that a particular situation was out of hand, that it could not be stopped? Have you ever believed that an individual or perhaps a business was unstoppable? Then maybe you have ascribed power to a false deity. You might have actually believed that even God could not stop what was going on. This psalmist, in his cries to one true and all-powerful God, is responded to with a storm that reminds him of the intensity and strength of the one who created life. He is left speechless other than to cry glory in the presence of the Holy One. It reminds me of another biblical character by the name of Job, when after searching for answer after answer, when listening to the friends of his day and all of their ideas, is finally faced with God, who presents to him the power over all of creation and says, "Job, were you even there?" In the story of Job, this is the question to end all of his questions. He needed to be confronted with God to understand that answers were not what he really needed. He needed to get a grasp on who God is. The psalmist cried out on behalf of the people for God to stop the wickedness that had beset them. What he needed to hear was the voice of God over the waters, a thundering and powerful reminder of the presence of his Creator. In our time of distress, this too is what we need. We think we need an answer, a solution, a remedy to all that is wrong in the world, but we cannot be guaranteed any of those things, and most certainly not by the sources we're turning to. What we can do is to acknowledge the power and presence of our Creator, to do what is right in God's eyes, and to trust that regardless of the outcome, He is Lord, all caps. Because Yahweh spoke his voice through a storm, did not absolve Israel of their responsibility to walk upright and in God's ways, but it did remind them of ultimately who was in charge. As we move forward into more uncertain days, we too are not absolved of responsibility to do what is right, but we are reminded of who the ultimate power is. May we do what we have to do, lead where we have to lead, even in our human weakness, doing the best that we can do, but ultimately relying on God, the God of the universe, for the final outcomes. Our job is to worship Him. I conclude with the words to the children's chorus. My God is so big, so strong, and so mighty that there is nothing my God cannot do. May God bless you as you enter into the rest of this week and worship Him.
Above all powers, above all kings, above all nature and all created things, above all wisdom and all the ways of man, you were here before the world began. Above all kingdoms, above all thrones, above all wonders the world has ever known, above all wealth and treasures of the earth,